basically started out just like a heavy rain, and then out of nowhere, the water levels just rose. That nobody saw it coming. We got neighboring houses, walls are gone.
No, this wasn't like this like 3 minutes ago. Something busted up there. A garbage can just went down the road. It's sitting right at our foundation.
After I bought, I started hearing the stories about, you know, a storm in 2011 that actually did cause damage to the wall. And you start hearing about that, and then you're figuring out, you know, what went on with that. But we had heavy rains before, nothing like that. Everything else was fine, you know. Wall did its job, ground did its job, brook did its job. You know, water level gets a little high, but nothing serious happens. It's just what you usually expect until July 9th.
The new law would require disclosure of the knowledge of the seller of whether the property is within a 100-year or 500-year flood zone, whether there have ever been any flood insurance claims made for the property, whether there have actually been any flooding at the property that the seller knows about. The law had been that if the seller didn't want to make any disclosures, they could just give the buyer $500 and not disclose anything. And it became standard in New York real estate transactions just to give over the $500 and not disclose anything. That option has now been taken away. And so the sellers are always going to have to make these disclosures to potential buyers before the buyer sign a binding contract to buy the house.
When I got out of bed, the water was already knee deep. So all downstairs knee deep, and he was in the crate, the water was up to his chest already.
We've had the flooding before, almost every 10 years, but nothing of this magnitude. Okay, nothing of this. So, and I think the governor, in her speech, she said this is a 1 in 1,000-year event. Unfortunately for me, it's a 1 in every 10-year event, just not of the magnitude of that we received on July 9th. And I find it really hard to believe that the flooding only originated when we purchased the house. Okay, I don't believe in coincidence, because 3 times, what occurred to make it now to start flooding? You know, so that's very concerning. It was never disclosed to us. I'm not saying there was, I'm not sure, but I find it hard to believe that the flooding only began once we purchased the home.
The only time a buyer is told that there's a flood risk is if they're purchasing a home in a 100-year floodplain designated by FEMA. That's the only time they know anything. If they're in a 500-year floodplain, if there is a specific contour to a city street or a dead end that happens to flood during heavy rainstorms, they don't know. If things have changed because of climate change and there have been more recent flooding and maps have not been updated, they don't know. And there's been a flood designated in every single county in New York in the last 10 years. Lots of those floods have not been in floodplains. And so this will make sure that buyers are afforded the knowledge that the seller has.
And the damage to the property was the basement filled with water to about 24-ish inches thereabouts, and then all the structural retaining walls and berms basically were washed away when the floodwaters kind of came rushing through. My first thing was to shut down the power because I know water and electricity doesn't mix, and that was when it wasn't that bad. And then as soon as things started getting really bad and the water was waist high over there, my first thought was to evacuate everyone. So I knocked on everyone's doors, told them to get in their cars, get a bag to go, and get ready to leave. Same thing with the people that live here. I have roommates and then also tenants that live downstairs. So I wanted to make sure everyone was safe. There's not a lot you can do when God sends rain, especially if you think of the biblical story of the Bible, of the flood that wiped out the whole world. So if there's more rain, there's nothing really that I can do. We set up a little bit of like a blockade out of cement, and we're praying that things don't come again. But at this point, we're praying that it doesn't get bad, and if it does, we're ready to leave. I have no physical attachment to the house, so if it goes, and that's what God wants, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and that's awesome. So.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download MetroTV Extend sekarang.